Hello, everybody. It is 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in East Tennessee on this May 2nd, 2025. So, lots going on. I'm doing an end of the week wrap-up video. So, if you don't know, with everything going on in the States, hard to follow. Yesterday was Election Day in the United Kingdom. There were 23 councils. So, if you don't know, they have, the federal level, House of Commons, House of Lords, Prime Minister, and then they don't have like states or provinces, then they have counties on the local level, okay? So up were 23 total council seats and big ones, like Kent. I didn't know most people have heard of Kent on the southwest, and Lincolnshire, and Yorkshire up in the northeast. So it was a lot, and there were a total of 1,600 seats up for grab. So the last election there, Tories did very well. This was around 2019, in that time where Boris Johnson and them had a huge election before they messed things up and got annihilated by the Tories, at least from a seat point of view. So let's jump right in to see what happened. Oh, there was also an MP by-election. Here in the United States, we would call it a special election. They call it a by-election, meaning there was a vacancy in Parliament, the actual British Parliament, which was just one seat, okay? And in the last election, the Labour Party won that seat by about 30 points. So boom. Here you go. Right there on my Twitter feed there. It's Nigel Farage on the left, Reform Party, and that is Sarah Paunchen. She had won the by-election. Now she won, ready for this? 6 votes. That's right, a total of 6. They did 4. Now, for those in America, I want you to think about this. After hand counting in the room with everybody and everybody in every party, Labor Challenge said, let's just do a recount. No courts, just did a recount. Everybody was there, recounted again, and then it went to 6 votes. So it was 4 votes, 6 votes, Labor conceded, game over, no questions, no machines, none of this, just efficient elections. But anyway, so Sarah Paunchen is now the first Reform elected in the by-election since the Labor victory last July. So that is fantastic news. So hopping off, so what's going on in these local seats? Okay, here you go. Reform Party, okay, they're 18 of 23 councils. They count the council elections like Parliament, a lot of it the next day. But yeah, Reform UK having basically 0 seats because it's a new party. 575 seats so far. Okay, the Tories, who had clearly over 800 seats, they had lost, but it looks like about 2/3. They're down to 266 after losing 565. The majority of them going to Reform. Labour had clearly had 200 and something seats at minimum. They lost again. They lost to 2/3 as well. Okay, they lost 160. Now, the benefactor on the left is the Liberal Democrats, because the popularity of Keir Starmer's Labour Party right now in the UK is horrendous. I don't know what they expect. But you got to remember that in July, because of Reform fielding candidates and getting 14% of the vote, and the Tories getting 21 or 22% of votes split, Labour actually got less votes than they did the prior election in 19, and even less votes than the election before that. Okay, so, they had 2 elections ago, they had over 10 million votes. They barely got 9 million votes nationwide. And there was about 37% of the vote. But because of that, and it's first past the post in each of these MP districts, they ended up getting 400 plus seats and have like a supermajority in Parliament. But they are highly unpopular. I'm not surprised. So you have an abandonment of Labour by the left to the Liberal Democrats, and you have an abandonment of the Tories, which they don't deserve it as well, by Reform. And Nigel Farage has already said it's no longer a two-party state now. It is not. A few months ago, they had passed, I think it was actually over the Christmas break, they had passed in terms of party membership, the largest party in the United Kingdom. So this is a fantastic result, and this is a good thing to be excited about, because this is, again, with the National Rally in France and the Off Day in Germany, totally what do you call it? Totally, rising in their nations because of the timing of the elections. UK hasn't really had to, and then they had the whole Brexit thing, so they kind of started it really first. But in terms of national and local politics, they're a little behind the game. But here's their first chance to really make a difference and made an impact. They did percentage-wise in last July on the national, but now they're winning these seats and these. All right, and I think that's fantastic. So moving on. Let me check. I would like to, fine, let's just switch to my Twitter feed here. Scroll down a bit. So what already? Boom, breaking. Nigel Farage has told Reform Council's climate and diversity staff to find new jobs. Basically, it's the policy of the Reform Party that any kind of DEI, diversity, or climate jobs within those councils and employees were cleaning house. Awesome. He's also made positions on illegal immigration issues. Awesome. See, you know what this is? We have Make America Great Again, MAGA here in the United States. This is MEGA, Make England Great Again. And now it's starting. This is a wonderful thing. Now, if we can get their mind to get off the neocon mind in terms of foreign policy, we'll be fully on our way. All right. So I'm really excited about that. So let's move on a little bit. Speaking of elections, the old British Empire, Commonwealth, Oceania Elects is a website that tracks polls. So I've done an Australia election. It's tomorrow. The coalition, the liberal in Australia is the right, okay? The Labour is the left, and they call it the coalition because there's also a national party that the Liberal Party runs into, okay? And they've been polling Mrs. last election by a lot of people last time where they were underpolled, a range between 3 and 6, where the Conservatives outperformed the polling. But now, most polls were up by 3, okay, like 52, 48, 53, 47 for the Liberals. Now, it looks like a couple of polls, there's another poll dangling, so they've tightened it to 2. Now, if they're off 2 to 4, you could have a Liberal National Coalition victory. So hopefully that happens tomorrow. That would be pretty good. Now, keep in mind, there's a first, they do like ranked choice. You vote for who you want as a party, and then you vote on a second ballot while you're in the booth on your second choice. So that's why. So I wouldn't be surprised if LNP definitely won in the first round, but that won't mean anything until the second round of counting. And it's not like there's a second vote or second round. You mark it on the ballot, your second choice. So it won't be like getting two separate things. Now, here's the thing. From their last poll, 20, on the 22nd and 23rd, okay, Conservatives went up, the left went down. And this was just done the 27th and 29th. So that's pretty good. And then there's another one that came out that was April 29th to May 1st through yesterday. And they show this is basically a 3-point lead for the Liberals. But it's tightening from some of the earlier polls I saw a couple weeks and so forth. So that's an update. I'll be keeping an eye on the elections on that. I'll definitely be tweeting out on it. As they come out. The time difference makes it a pain. So let's move on to some domestic stuff. We don't need to hear the guy. But this is great. The husband of California U.S. District Court Judge Jennifer L. Thurston, the judge who just ruled that President Trump's administration can't arrest any more illegals unless they have a warrant for their arrest, is a multifamily real estate broker in California who caters to the illegal alien and immigrant community and makes Instagram videos about how Trump's mass deportation and immigration policies are bad for multifamily real estate brokers and investors. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but she goes on and she cites cases of how it's conflict of interest now for her to even make an insane ruling to go there. So I just wanted to show that up, that who these people are, that they're self-interested because they have no soul, right? They have no faith, honor, or anything like that. That's why they have the ideology they do, which is the antithesis of people of faith, tradition, values, community, etc., nationalistic identity. So, and he's making bucks. So he's worried about his pocketbook. you know. So his wife says, let's protect that. You can't deport anybody at all. And I did my last video why it's insane. Anybody watching this video knows it's insane as well. So, yeah. It's just unbelievable. All right, so I want to jump back up. So we were on elections there before. What's going on in Germany? The AfD is a right-wing extremist group. German intelligence agency says the classification opens the door to deeper surveillance and reignites a debate over whether the far-right party should be banned. Okay, so apparently the intelligence community is marking them as an extremist organization that gives them power. They came out with this 1,000-page report. Listen, if they really are the Nazi party or they really are the fascist party, you won't need a 1,000-page report. That's them chasing around this and coming up with a legal theory here and trying to connect all these dots to get to a point. They don't like their anti-globalist policies. Okay, they don't like their anti-illegal immigration, okay, positions. They don't like their let's keep our heritage national identity positions. They don't like let's keep our industrial positions. They don't like let's keep our energy and manufacturing based positions. That's what they have a problem with. And now they're using the intelligence community to take the next step. Because even though AfD finished second, Merz with the conservatives is going to be coalition with the left, bypassing AfD. The polling since the election shows AfD getting even stronger. So these globalists can't have that, you know, and they do it in each country. Like in Romania, we'll take out Georgescu using the courts. Now we're going to use this backdoor. The United States will arrest Trump. Okay, so this is what we got going on here in Germany. Unbelievable. But they will stop at nothing to keep their power and their systems, their corrupt systems that benefit themselves at the expense of their own citizens and nations. All right, a little domestic from E.J. Antoni again at Heritage. Okay, employment number was up. If you didn't know, it was 177,000 jobs, better than expected at 138, which was more, but it's better than expectation. It's going. It also wasn't fueled by government jobs again. It was real private sector jobs. But here's the key number I want to put there, because I've done this before in videos, is the full-time versus part-time, which was a huge problem under the Obama years and a huge problem under the Biden years. And there are a multitude of reasons for that. Both full-time and part-time jobs rose in April as the labor force grew by 500,000, and those not in the labor force, sitting on the sidelines, fell by more than 300,000. Unemployment rate was flat. So the reason why the unemployment rate didn't get better is because more people entered the workforce. It's called the labor participation rate. It's the denominator number, okay? And as you can see, the lines, and that's the how many full-time jobs, okay? There you go, blue line. That number was down to 132 less than a year ago, million. Now we are up to nearly 135. And you see that spike. That spike is since Trump's been elected. That little spike there on the right. Okay, and more part-time. Okay, so that's good economic news as well, following what I thought was a good GDP number if you look at the underline and ignore the headline number. And I did that in my last video. So let's move on a little bit here. The whole tariffs and the economy. China quietly exempts about a quarter of U.S. imports from tariffs. This was in Bloomberg. That is correct. There was also a move they're making on trying to get control of fentanyl. So here we go. Do I think Trump wants a 245% tariff? No. We still need these products that we already outsourced or were always made there. There are products we need. That's one of the reasons why Trump is doing this, so we don't have to rely on key products. At least not in China. Like if it was made next door in Canada or close by, that makes it easier and less of a national security risk. Okay, but we still need products right now. So he's using it and trying to get some leverage here. So China will give, he'll give, China will give, he'll give, and that will buy time to keep the access of these goods and not so expensive, so we can still function in the short time while we try to get some of the production of these goods back to the United States, or I said at least shorten the supply chain. Like I don't have a problem. I have some of them going to El Salvador now, Argentina now, okay, where we have real regional hegemon dominance in the Western Hemisphere, and we don't have to be as worried about what's going on with China, okay? And I think that's a pretty good move on this part. So I'm surprised it actually took too long. China's going to be stubborn on this. But, so I just wanted to crack up some numbers on this issue. So I came across this. China ranks 6th in gold holdings, yet gold comprises only 6% of its reserve assets. Now that's interesting. So, okay, they got room to grow there. They got room to grow. So gold reserves, U.S., very high. That number makes me feel nice. If it's there, right? If it's there. Germany, Italy, France, Russia, that's a huge amount of gold reserves, and they've increased that. I'm going to show you that in a little chart later. Switzerland, India, Japan, Turkey, Netherlands. Okay, gold as a share of the country's reserves, percent. So China doesn't have a high percentage of gold reserves. So they're relying upon other reserves, which are mostly currency, right? And particularly American dollars and American debt, okay? They're going to also have other currencies, but also other currencies are also backed by American dollars being the prime reserve currency. So even though you might have, I got euros in my reserves, I might have some, Russian rubles, I might have some Chinese yuan, etc. in my reserves. A lot of those, like the euro particularly, are backed by dollars because the European Central Bank holds dollars. So even if you're not holding dollars directly and U.S. debt directly, you're still holding U.S. debt now and cash indirectly because of the holdings of the central banks of the other countries' holdings that they have. All right. Now, U.S. securities dominate China's $3.2 trillion of foreign exchange reserves. See, the debt. Long-term U.S. Treasuries on the bottom. Long-term agency bonds. Basically, those are bonds issued by agencies of governments, right? Long-term corporate and other bonds. Corporate stocks, short-term U.S. Treasuries, others. Okay? Now you see that, but do you want to see something there? Remember that 6%? You see how it's sloping down gradually, but it is sloping down. And they are buying gold. Now you don't want to do a huge rush in gold, otherwise you'll artificially drive the demand up, right? You want to spread that out. But it shows you that China wants to get that 6% number up. So there is a timeline. Now, there's the huge demand for dollars. It's still the prime, and but I think down the road we are at risk of losing this. And we're walking around with 37 trillion debt, and we know we're going to blow through 50 trillion soon in a few years, right? Probably by 2035 and whatever. With the debt problem, seems like it's not really going to go away. At least we have to increase our domestic production, okay? And it can't be just a purely financialized and service economy. So not only is there national security reasons to bring a lot of this production home, but it's good economics as well. Okay, and it will increase the buying power, price parity of the dollar, at least domestically, right? That's what Russia enjoys right now. While the exchange rate and the ruble and the dollar is strong, you can't look at it that way because it's what the ruble buys you inside of Russia as the domestic currency of exchange. It's called price parity, and that price parity in Russia is really strong, okay? It's like why Tarko couldn't believe what he got when he did the exchange rate in dollars after the food store, okay? That's why you can't say, oh, a Russian makes this in rubles and then convert it to dollars, because the buying power domestically is different. That's what that price parity is. Total U.S. treasuries held by China, Belgium and Luxembourg have remained stable. Why the hell is Belgium and Luxembourg in this? Because China uses those two countries to also hold their reserves for them. So they're putting it in the same boat, okay? So again, holdings of U.S. treasuries from 2014, it is dropping, okay? So you see the gradual exit of the U.S. treasury, the U.S. dollar, right? We're also seeing the increase of, it was funny when Mark Cuban put out the tweet like 6-7 months ago, look how much percent of the SWIFT system is done in dollars. It's gone up. Yes, because less transactions as a percentage are on the SWIFT system because a lot of countries are doing in each of their own currencies. Now that's hard to do because what do you do if you have excess, rupees from India? okay? And you don't need to buy that much more from India. So that's what makes it limiting. That's why BRICS, when they go to Brazil, they're going to do, what is it called? The BRICS Bridge, or, I forgot what they call it, and all these other payment systems. So you're going to see that eventually. So it shows you why it's important what we're doing with the tariffs, okay? We need to leave some on to really encourage domestic production back home, pharmaceuticals, things like that, okay? Then we use some for leverage, okay, to make a deal. And then the third batch is for the people who really don't want to make a deal, who just want to rip off, then we use it as punitive tariffs, okay, as future deterrent. So there are 3 levels of tariffs is what I call it. And I think that's the 3-pronged strategy. But this is the reason why it's important what we're doing, okay? If we would just get our debt under control, and we would stop using these international trading systems to sanction and go after countries, we wouldn't be in this place, because everybody wouldn't want to lessen their U.S.-based holdings and dollar-denominated assets in their reserves. But even though there's a decline, the positive news is these are still trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, which show you this is not a short-term fear, probably not even intermediate fear, unless there becomes an accelerant that would cause these to go. But this is the trend of the world, and we have to prepare for it. And let's prepare for it while we can, not when we have to. And I believe that's what the Trump administration is trying to achieve. So that was that. So now, I had mentioned Russia before. Boom. U.S. dollar as a percent of Russian central bank's foreign exchange and gold assets. Okay. Dollar share of foreign exchange assets. Boom. And then dollar share of foreign exchange and gold assets. Okay. You could see just dropping. Now, it's the sanctions. Okay. Because it puts it at risk. Clearly, the relationship between the two countries stinks. They want alternative trading system because of the sanctions. So there's no reason for them to have huge amount. And we know they increased their gold reserves up to about $600 billion recently. Okay, and they lowered their debt by $27 billion to about 16% of their GDP. So they're not interested in holding the dollars. So that's very specific to Russia. But I just wanted to put their position. They have huge gold, as we showed you on that other slide. So
the president was in the Vatican, had this iconic image talking to Volodymyr Zelensky in those 2 chairs and huddled down. A much different scene than when he was last in the White House, as you well know. Where do you see that? Is that going to come to fruition?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to give the president some credit here, because there was a really big breakthrough and hasn't gotten that much coverage. But for 3 years, these sides have fought, and each of them has said, no peace, we're going to fight until the other guy is basically knocked out. What we've seen now in the last couple of weeks is each side has put down, this is our peace proposal. The Ukrainians did it, the Russians did it. And now I think the question is to see whether we can actually find some middle ground here for these guys to bring this conflict to a close. I really don't believe that any person, of the 8 billion people in the world, I don't think anybody could have gotten this deal done other than Donald J. Trump. When I say this deal, I mean getting these guys to actually propose a peace settlement. But it's going to be up to the Russians and the Ukrainians. Now that each side knows what the other's terms for peace are, it's going to be up to them to come to an agreement and stop this brutal, brutal conflict. It's not going anywhere, Brett. It's not going to end anytime soon. And I think for the Ukrainians, yes, of course, they're angry that they were invaded, but are we going to continue to lose thousands and thousands of soldiers over a few miles of territory this or that way? I hope both of them come to their senses. And if they do, it will be because Donald J. Trump, I think, brokered one of the great peace deals of the 21st century.
I mean, you got the minerals deal. You got that signed. So you're optimistic. Can I say optimistic?
Look, I am optimistic, but it is ultimately, it's hard to say confident, because the Russians and the Ukrainians, they're the ones who have to take the final step. We got them talking. We got them offering peace proposals. We got the minerals deal done. I think we're in a place where they've got to say, we're done with the fighting. We're done with losing thousands and thousands of young people we're done with this. But only Russia and Ukraine can make that decision. That's not something even President.
The president.
All right. So Vance had a lot to say on with Brett Baer on Fox. So here's what's going on in the peace process. Okay, Kellogg and Mersheimer on Judging Freedom. I love it. Called him. This guy's on Cloud Cuckoo Land. Kellogg's going around talking about this. He seems to like be representing the Ukraine and the European position with these ideas like peacekeepers dividing up. What? Okay. One of the prime reasons of this driving force is the NATO issue. So how is Russia going to agree to NATO troops in Ukraine? Okay. He says, the war will go on. It's going to go on because there are certain preconditions that the Russians have put forth. And there's no talk about it in Europe. There's no talk about it with Zelensky. And you can clearly see the push between the Europeans pushing Zelensky and what they're trying to do, okay? You had one guy talking about, one ex-general in Europe talking about how they have to form a new NATO without the United States. Great, that's what I want, okay? But, they're just have a different position, and there's a lot of daylight in between both the Ukrainians and the Russians and the Europeans and the Americans, okay? Zelensky has a problem at home with a lot of the nationalists if he just concedes Crimea, okay, that it's there. Crimea ain't going back. So I don't know what you're giving up, okay? Then you have, Witkoff, who is now met, 4 or 5 times with Putin for a total of 10 hours, 15 hours with? And I think the whole Witkoff issue is Trump trusts him, and he doesn't trust the people and the advice he got in his first administration. Pompeo and Haley, he knows them and knows the true neocon position. Okay? So he brings in a friend, someone he knows he can trust, but it's like whatever Witkoff comes up with, that's going to be the realistic deal. And because of these conversations, he really understands the dynamics of the conflict. Okay? Here in the West, you don't listen to the Russian side at all. Okay? We don't even hear the Zelensky when he gives his speech here in the Western media. When he gets on his laptop and does his Zoom or whatever it is, his speeches from his office, okay, and what he's saying, all right, and what he's saying and what the Russians are, that's not close, okay. No NATO in the Constitution, the recognition of the 4 oblasts, right, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. Crimea as well. But that was kind of the deal back in June that Putin offered them. So now it's going to be even more, okay? So I don't know what's going on. So it's so hodgepodgey. I don't see a uniform thing. Is that because there are battles behind the scenes on what to do and how to do it? When the Ukrainians are here, Kellogg's running around talking just fantasy world stuff in his proposal and what the Ukrainians are saying. Russians aren't going to agree to that. Don't even have the man on. I don't know what he's talking about. He clearly doesn't understand the history or the dynamics. And has he even talked to the Russians or listened to them? Or is he's just constantly dealing with the Ukrainians and the Europeans and coming up with ideas? Witkoff is the one I believe we should be focusing on. And then Rubio is just repeating the administration's line when he goes on the thing. Now, I think Waltz getting, Vance can say what he was demoted. No one wants to go from the National Security Advisor to the UN. UN guy now works for Rubio. Clear demotion. I don't think it has to do with Signalgate and all that stuff. I think there are policy issues. Okay? Right? There was a report that it was Gabbard, Vance, and I forgot who it was, stop the U.S., Israeli, or stop the Israelis from doing this bombing mission or something like that. I believe there is behind the scenes debate. And I think the decision to remove Waltz was more of a policy position. So that's where I think it's going. So I'm just commenting that where he says, the war is going to go, I think he's right. It is. because I don't think and there will not be a ceasefire. Lavrov went on, said it. Why are we going to give 30 days if the purpose is to reorganize the Ukrainian military? That is in, not in good shape right now. All right, so you got to think about it from the logical point of view. All right, and they're starting to move more and more. That's Russian steamroller is going to keep going. So unless what Witkoff's doing is my gut, and get the Ukrainians on board with that in reality, then I don't think a peace deal is coming on. I could see a ceasefire for a very short period of time, like 2 or 3 days, just like they're doing for the to celebrate the end of the World War II on May 9th. But if there's really a close deal, like listen, like we are close, like the 1 or 2 items and details we're ironing out, but on the key components, like no NATO, whatever. And then you have the issue that Zelensky's out of the Constitution. The Rada knows that, meaning that his term expired a year ago. So is he valid? Does he leave office, someone else gets elected? Because the next election won't have all these Russians voting. They'll all be pure ethnic Ukrainians. So they could elect some ultra-nationalist guys like, nope, we didn't recognize the peace deal. We're going back to war again. Okay? So Russia worries about that. So there are a lot of things. But if you get to that point where it's just a few details you're ironing out, then I can see a ceasefire really taking hold. Well, we know it. We're 90% there. So let's at least stop doing A, B, and C, So I just want to give my thoughts on what I think's going on there and the hodgepodginess of not one message. When you really look and listen to the people in Russia, whether it's Putin, Lavrov, Zarkova, Peskov, they're all on the same page. There is nothing. For years, always on the same page. Not rogue generals in Ukraine. Rubio's supposed to be in charge. But yet it's Witkoff over there. But I would say the key person is Witkoff because at the end, it's who Trump trusts. So hopefully that continues, and I'm glad they're meeting and so forth. So I just wanted to give my thoughts on that. So since we're talking about this and the war, this is the Sumy region. Now, a week ago, as you know, Kursk territory was completely liberated by the Russians, so that Kherson was over. And since then, this is to the northwest. That lines up with Kursk, Sumy region. As you can see, Russia's taken a bunch of territory, 90 kilometers in, and they're pushing on those 3 axes indicated by those 3 red lines. The gray zone is the fighting zone on the map. Brown is confirmed taking Russian territory. So they're advancing in Sumy now. Okay? This is Kherson. Now, I had mentioned in my last video that there's been a lot of pressure on the Zaporozhye region, which compared to Luhansk, Kursk, Donetsk, it's been more quiet. Okay, believe me, it's been fighting, but it's not really. Well, here we go. Now this is Kherson to the west, which has been even more quieter than Zaporozhye because it's the farthest west of the front and closer to Odessa. These are little islands there. Okay, the armed forces of Ukraine showed that Russia's been trying to launch operations and start to take some of these islands here on the Dnieper and cross to cross over. That's down on the west of the Dnieper River, granted farther west, but that is going to be a big problem for the armed forces of Ukraine. You're talking about split, like a diversion of reinforcements, okay? And it shows you Russia's expanding the front now that they pushed them out of Kursk. See, the objective of the Kursk operation, good job with the British who planned it and guided it for them, was that if we create this front, the Russians will have to divert forces from Donetsk and Luhansk, and then we can strengthen our lines on the defense down there, keep them occupied up there. But that's not what happened. Russia didn't panic. It's as if they knew they were coming. They evacuated people, they waited, they went slowly. And in fact, Russia started upping their operations in Donetsk after Kursk. And they took the 8 months to finally push the Ukrainians out slowly. They did not change their strategy, and they stayed patient and took the job done. But now, the Russians are starting to do what the Ukrainians were hoping for when they launched the Kursk operation, which is pressure in Sumy now, advances in Zaporozhye now, advances in Kherson now, okay? And then with Western weapons starting to slow down, and you have a big man shortage problem in Ukraine, this is not good, okay? And this is even more incentive for Ukraine to make a deal now. before you lose even more territory. The last one, so I've been doing videos for several months now in Pokrovsk. You see it's open land to get to. It's very hard, but they've reconnaissance there. So this was showing, and you could see it was geolocated by one of the mappers here, that they actually now have troops inside the city, at least the outer parts of the city. Okay, what they were doing is moving very small units at night and kind of just hiding out or whatever, and then they kind of massed together, and now this looks like they're starting to launch operations. Now, just north of Pokrovsk is another oblast called Dnipropetrovsk. So they're going to get up there. Plus, this also splits the highway from the remaining forces to the east of Pokrovsk, defending the last 15% of Donetsk from the Russians. So it's all pressure and all go. So anybody who says the word stalemate, go look at the maps, because it's not true at all. It's not even close to true. Okay, Russia is never been more in the driver's seat than it is right now. And just because they don't do blitzkrieg, 1 million troops and 10,000 tanks right to one location, okay, because that opens you up to mass casualties. That's not what they want. They want to keep it as a SMO. And I think our Western NATO people don't understand that. But anyway, that is an update on the Ukraine war. So that's my video for the week. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to keep an eye out to see those final results of the elections in the UK. I will post them up when they're done. Also, keep an eye on Australia. I'm going to post on those as well. Keep an eye on any news in the battlefield in Ukraine, this AfD situation in Europe. Also, you have Romania's elections coming up on the 8th, I believe, as well. So a lot to keep an eye on. India and Pakistan seem to be showing restraint, so I'm good about that. Otherwise, I would have put something up. But I'm following that and what's going on in the Middle East as well. So you can follow me on my X at PatriotPlanner1 and on my Getter at PatriotPlanner. And if you like the video, please like, follow, and share. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Hope the weather's good and enjoy the beginning of summer. Have a nice weekend. Bye.